Hey everyone, it's Mrs. Wallace. I just wanted to do this really quick video just to answer a few questions about the upcoming post-classical small group assignment. We can certainly answer more questions in class, but in case you did want to get a head start on some of the reading, there's a few things that you should know. So first of all, and I'm using another history teacher's map, just because this particular map gives us a little bit of a highlight of some of the societies that are in place in the post-classical era. And if you think back to some of the readings from Bentley or from Strayer, some of the key characteristics about the post-classical time period is the scale of some of the trade and interactions between societies. And this even includes the Americas, although in our exploration of the post-classical period, for a while we're going to leave out the Americas. We're just going to focus primarily on 5 different societies that we haven't had a chance to really spend a lot of time with. One is going to be West and Eastern Africa, so looking at the Western kingdoms of Ghana and Mali, looking at Eastern Africa in particular, some of the coastal areas that border the Arabian Peninsula and also are not far from like Indian Ocean trade. These societies have a bit of a trade network going on, and then they're also networked, outside of societies in West and East Africa. We're going to include in this, even though we know that the Abbasid Empire was in place, we're going to move away from the Islamic Empire because we spent some time with it, but no, it's one of the anchor empires that Bentley highlights. But we will look in particular at India. We will also spend some time with the societies that become very influenced by India in this time period, including places like modern-day Cambodia, into some of the areas near Indonesia. There become a great deal of ways in which the culture of India moves beyond India, and of course Buddhism is a part of that, the move of Buddhism to China. But we will also spend some time with China, primarily 3 dynasties in the earlier part of the post-classical period, even though this map highlights the Ming Dynasty, something that we look at in class, but a little bit after this project. We will be primarily looking at the Sui, the Tang, and the Song dynasties in post-classical China, and the dominance of China in its region becomes part of its kind of role as an anchor society within its region. And then we also look at Korea, which has a political system in the post-classical era that moves from a 3-kingdom type of fragmented political system to something that becomes much more centralized over time. And then we can also look at Japan, which during the post-classical era, we actually see some degree of what some historians might describe as feudalism, kind of a political dominance with some aristocratic individuals, and there's a great deal of evolution of the political system in the time period of post-classical Japan. Okay, so the key thing for our project is that we're going to kind of look at the post-classical era through the lens of these 5 different societies. So we're really interested in kind of like internally what's happening politically, economically, socially in these societies. And because we're looking at timelines that are fairly expansive, we're looking kind of across as how things change perhaps over the course of the post-classical era. How do we see increases, for example, in trade or in some of the cross-cultural connections? The other really big takeaway is that lots of these societies begin to interact more heavily with each other. It's not that societies didn't trade before or didn't necessarily have cultural interactions before, but the scale becomes much, much larger. So we're interested in this project because it also, in addition to studying, say, for example, Tang Dynasty China and getting kind of a handle on what life in China was like under the Tang Dynasty, you can also start to imagine what was China's role in a larger, like, regional context. How did post-classical China connect to, say, post-classical India or post-classical Korea or some of the other societies? So we're interested in kind of the very, the scope of each society as well as the bigger bigger picture. And what every group will be doing in the project is basically researching the timeline of the post-classical era. We will narrow this the best we can, so that way, rather than saying looking at 500 all the way to the year 1400, we've kind of created some very natural bookends for you. For the most part, some of the societies have a timeline where one political system comes and then ends, and then a new political system begins, such as, for example, the Mandate of Heaven in China and the movement into new dynasties. So we're kind of looking at the Sui, the Tang, and the Song dynasty. Even though we could certainly look beyond the Song dynasty as post-classical China, we're going to kind of maintain a little bit of, two bookends for the group that's researching that. For groups that are looking at India or some parts of African societies, especially East Africa, sometimes it's not necessarily chronological, but in some cases there's also some societies within, say, for example, India, that exist side by side. There might be some Hindu kingdoms at the same time. There might be an Islamic kingdom. They may exist side by side, or they may overlap a little bit. And in that case, we're kind of looking at post-classical India being representative of some of the it's some degree of not being a centralized political system, which speaks to some of the diversity within India. Okay, so the idea that every group is about at first is researching your particular region, and then also on the project sheet there are particular kind of subtopics that you're going to be focusing on. Okay, so if I just kind of look for a second at the Postclassical World Project, you can see kind of for every single region, there might be some particular ways in which you're breaking down kind of the beginning and end periods that you are assessing and evaluating. Okay, for every single region, okay, each group is actually going to be dealing with a particular broad question. To what extent? Okay, so it is a to what extent question. Did your region evolve and prosper during the post-classical age? Okay, did your particular region become a prosperous center of trade, for example? Did your region develop some new diffusion of other cultures? Did your society, in what ways did your region change during this time? What are some of the ways in which economically, socially, culturally, even politically, there become some kind of significant features about your society, okay, that you're studying? You do not need to include in your final presentation every single piece of information that's in this research list, but your group should research and keep in mind these particular themes as you're looking, okay? You do want to start your research by considering the geography of your region. How and in what way is geography significant, okay? So for example, in a place like Japan, which is an island society, the degree of connection to its, exposure as an island, as well as the role of the ocean and the sea. There's a great deal of significance in that. In terms of how much arable land and things like that there's a variety of things that geographically could be really significant in terms of some of the global trade networks as well. Where is your society positioned? You might also look at the political system, and for many of your societies, this is kind of a driving part of the change that occurs in the post-classical societies. How and in what way does the government change and evolve? And you might look at that over the course of a particular timeline. What factors are really shaping the government at different points? What is the structure of the government? Who has power? Who's kind of given a great deal of power, maybe in the social hierarchy, who maybe not so much? What is the economic system all about? How might there be prosperity and wealth in the society? What are some of the features of the economy? How important is innovation? What are some other aspects of the issues of rich versus poor? What are some of those aspects that define your society? The social system in terms of a social hierarchy. You might also look at gender roles in a variety of ways. societies, there's some significant features related to the social system. This connects very much to culture. You might find some particular cultural elements that become very important. This could connect to language. This could connect to religion. This could connect to art, right, and architecture, music. The crossover points. So, each one of these, topics that's up here might be things that you research, but your task is to, from your research, really work to answer the question and develop an outline that enables you to do two things. One is develop a presentation that will teach your peers about your region. So at the end of this project, what you're looking to create is kind of a teachable presentation of about 15 minutes where you can say, this is really significant about, say, post-classical Japan. This is what post-classical Japan was really all about. And in introducing some of that information to your peers, you're likely going to want to introduce it period by period. So for example, in Japan, maybe looking at the Nara period, the Heian period, there might be a way of kind of bringing in those various periods and showing how each period was kind of uniquely shaped, what changed, and in that conversation with your peers, you're making some points about some of the features of post-classical Japan. You also can consider some crossover points, at least one place where you're noting, for example, Japan's connection to one other society. For example, Japan's relationship with China, right? And the way in which Japan borrowed some particular cultural or governmental features from China, right? And so you might be able to kind of do a crossover point. There also might be a variety of crossover points. There could be something in regards to Eastern Africa, for example, and the Abbasid Empire, or it could be the society of India and maybe Buddhism and the way that it extends, across a pathway of merchants, but also lends itself to move to China. So there's a good number of places where you might see crossover points that just integrate some other societies. These questions that are on the sheet are not intended for you to answer every single question, but to help you kind of figure out what is a crossover point that makes a great deal of sense for my society and another. For India, for example, you might look at some Hindu ideas move to places like modern-day Cambodia, and how could we kind of get that type of interaction described. Okay, so in any case, that might be something that you do. Okay, for research, there will be a whole bunch of files for you in at least initial files, and for my biggest recommendation, my suggestion is that there often is a textbook chapter about your society and the post-classical era. So there is a textbook chapter about China, Japan, and Korea in post-classical era. There's also a textbook chapter about East and West Africa. There's also a textbook chapter about India. That is your best place to start some of your research because it puts together, in a sense, the timeline for you, some of the biggest points, and you can really adopt a lot of that information as like the nuts and bolts of your presentation. Some of the societies, the information in the textbook is a little bit lacking. Korea in particular is one of those, so I've included more information in the Korea folder because there's less in some of that base level information in the text. For some of the other societies, we'll continually add some content for you, and then you will also find some particular museum sites or some academic sites that are very specific to your region to be really, really helpful for you. You can also use the databases, so the Gale World History databases will be useful for you. And the beginning part of this project is going to be a lot of research and reading, maybe watching some documentaries, getting a very good kind of feel for the particular topic at hand. All students should have some degree of knowledge about all of the parts, although part of this might be that you're delegating, between students in a group who's going to specialize. So So for example, for the China group, you might have some people focusing on the Sui dynasty, some people on the Tang, and some people on the Song, and then those particular individuals might come together to address some of the content. The first step is to create a group outline. I will give you a sample in class so you have an idea of kind of what that looks like, but it's really a content outline of the key points that you want to share with your peers and a place to put your research as you go forth to develop your presentation and tools for your presentation. You will use your outline as the content base, okay? The outline will be due early next week, so either Monday and Tuesday, and the presentation should be at the end of the week. Okay, have a great night.